I used to walk Miller's Hollow Road all the time when I was younger. It wasn't the kind of place people went for fun. It was more like one of those stretches of back road you take because it cuts 10 minutes off your trip. A narrow dirt path tucked between thick timber, barely wide enough for 2 trucks to pass. No streetlights, no reflectors, just darkness that pooled in the ruts once the sun dipped. But for some reason, ever since my brother passed, I found myself taking that road more often than I should have. Maybe it was because it reminded me of the long walks we used to take out there, him teasing me for being scared of coyotes, me pretending I wasn't. Maybe I was trying to feel close to him, even though I knew that wasn't how grief worked. Whatever my reasons were then, I wish I'd ignored them. I wish I'd listened to the old folks who said that road held onto things. Voices, memories, echoes that were never supposed to linger. The night it happened was colder than it should have been for early fall. One of those evenings where the air felt wet and heavy, like rain was thinking about coming but never followed through. I'd stayed late at a friend's place on the far side of town, and instead of taking the highway home like a sensible person, I decided to cut through Miller's Hollow. The moment I turned onto that dirt stretch, my headlights barely cut through the dark. It was the wrong kind of dark, thick, settled, almost alive. The kind that felt like it didn't want you there. I parked near the entrance and stepped out to walk the rest of the way. Don't ask me why. Maybe I was restless that night, or maybe I just wanted to clear my head. The town lights sat faint behind me, little orange dots swallowed up by trees the further I went. I remember thinking how quiet everything was, except for the wind dragging itself through the branches overhead. It wasn't a natural kind of wind either. No steady rhythm, just long, uneven breaths moving through the treetops like something tired. I'd made it maybe half a mile in when I heard it. My name. Soft, fragile, like someone trying not to cry. It floated right behind me, close enough that instinct alone made me turn. But the road was empty. The trees on either side seemed to lean in, heavy shadows draped across them, but nothing moved. No footsteps, no branches breaking, nothing that could have made that sound. I told myself it was just my head playing tricks, the kind of half hallucination you get when you're tired. But before I took another step, it came again. This time closer, brushing past my ear like the breath of someone standing right behind me. I spun around so fast I stumbled. Still empty. The old folks in town always said the hollow kept voices. That when someone died along the trail, and apparently a few had long before I was born, their last words got trapped somehow, repeating themselves like scratched vinyl. I never believed any of that. Thought it was just backwoods superstition. The kind of stories parents told to keep their kids from wandering too far. But then the whisper changed. It said my name again, but now, it was my brother's voice. Not just a close resemblance, it was him. Down to the slight rasp he'd developed in his teen years. The way he always stretched the last syllable when he was trying to annoy me. Except this time, he wasn't teasing. His voice was trembling. Scared. I froze like something had reached inside me and flipped a switch. The air turned colder, sharp enough that I could see the faintest bit of breath leaving my mouth. My legs felt locked. I didn't know whether to run or answer or just collapse right there on the dirt road. When I didn't respond, the tone shifted again. My brother used to get frustrated when I ignored him. It had a specific sound, a clipped tightness. That sound was in the voice now. Impatient. Then angry. The trees reacted before I did. Branches rattled violently, shaking as if something massive had moved through them. Yet there was no wind. Not a single current of air touched my skin. The leaves trembled like they were afraid, or like something unseen was pushing through them. I stepped back once, then again. That's when I heard the first hint of movement in the tree lane. A soft crunch of leaves, then another, pacing me. Something walking just out of sight, hidden behind the dark. My name whispered again, but this time it came from the left side of the road. Then another whisper answered from the right. Then behind me. Different tones, different pitches. Some sounded familiar. Some didn't. A whole crowd of voices circling me in the dark, repeating my name over and over, some pleading, some furious, others hollow and distant like they'd traveled miles just to reach my ears. They overlapped until I couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. I tried to speak or yell or breathe, but nothing came out. And then something stepped onto the road. I didn't see it, not clearly. I caught the shape of a shadow stretching across the dirt, long and thin, though there was nothing to cast it. My breath finally broke free in a shaky gasp, and the moment I heard myself breathe, all the voices stopped at once. Silence. Complete. Then, from inches behind my right shoulder, my brother's voice whispered my name one more time. That broke me. I ran. I didn't think about direction, didn't think about footing, didn't even think about the fact that whatever had been circling me could move faster than I ever could. I just ran. My legs burned almost immediately, the cold air tearing into my chest, but I didn't slow. The whispers didn't stay behind. They followed, layers of them, like a crowd running right on my heels. Some shouted my name. Some begged me to stop. One, high-pitched and terrified, screamed. Branches whipped past me, but I never felt them. The road beneath my feet felt wrong, softer than dirt should feel, like I was running over something that shifted. I didn't look down. I couldn't. Somewhere ahead of me, I saw the faint glow of town lights. Weak little beads of yellow between the trees. I sprinted toward them like they were the only thing that could save me. Just before I reached the end of the hollow, one last voice called after me. Not angry. Not furious. Just sad. It whispered my name the way my brother used to when he wanted to tell me something serious. Something he didn't want anyone else to hear. That tone alone almost made me stop. Almost. I burst out of the tree lane so hard I stumbled into the gravel turnoff, collapsing onto my hands. The whispers cut off instantly. Not fading, not drifting away. Stopping like a door had slammed shut behind me. When I turned around, the road was empty. Quiet. Normal. I walked the rest of the way home shaking so badly I kept losing my balance. I didn't tell anyone what I'd heard. Didn't see the point. People around here believe their own stories but laugh at yours. That was months ago. And still, on nights when the wind drags itself through the branches and the air turns colder than it should be, I hear it. My name. Spoken in that same trembling voice. Like something in Miller's Hollow still wants me to come back. I'd heard about the Lantern Lady ever since I was a kid. Ridgepoint folks pass down stories the same way they pass down quilts and old pocket knives. Worn, frayed, but full of history. Every version of her tale was a little different, but all of them circled the same center. A woman searching for her lost boy somewhere along the Old Ridge Road, her lantern casting a glow that didn't quite look right. I never gave it much thought. Just a coal camp ghost story. Something parents used to keep their kids from wandering too far into the fog. And Ridgepoint always had fog. The kind that rolled in heavy and low, swallowing sound and shape until even your own footsteps felt borrowed. But all that folklore stayed just folklore to me until the night my truck overheated on that same ridge road, leaving me alone with nothing but the fog creeping up from the valley. It was late, close to midnight, and the air had a cold bite that settled deep in my clothes. The fog crawled over the gravel like something alive, swallowing the tree lane on both sides until even the nearest branches blurred into hazy shadows. I just stepped out to check the engine when I saw a thin ribbon of light sliding down the bend ahead. At first it looked like someone carrying a lantern, but the glow was wrong. Too pale. Too steady. It didn't bounce like a real flame. It drifted, smooth as water poured slowly downhill. I felt a little jolt of relief. Maybe a hiker, maybe someone living nearby. I called out, asking if they needed help or knew how far the nearest house was. The lantern paused instantly. Not like someone stopping mid-step. More like someone hitting a switch. The light froze in place, suspended in the fog. For a moment nothing happened. Then, from behind the glow, a voice answered me. It didn't sound threatening. Soft, broken, the kind of voice you get after crying too long. She asked if I'd seen her boy. Her words were thin but carried strangely well through the fog. Something about that tone pulled at the back of my mind, the way grief does when you hear it in a stranger. I stepped toward the glow without thinking, my boots crunching on the gravel. As I got closer, the fog seemed to pull apart just enough to let me see a shape behind the lantern. She stood at the edge of the bend, an outline cut from shadow. An old dress clung to her, soaked and torn, sticking to her legs like she'd climbed out of a creek. Her face was hidden behind wet strands of hair, long enough to drip onto the front of her dress. She wasn't shaking, wasn't moving at all. Her stillness was almost worse than any motion. She lifted the lantern slowly, angling it toward me. But the light never touched her. It glowed over the fog over the road, but her skin stayed dark, almost swallowed by shadow. Like the light refused to reach her. That's when the unease settled in me. Low, heavy, a quiet realization that something here wasn't right. I told her I hadn't seen any child. My voice sounded smaller than I meant it to be. I expected her to sag with disappointment, maybe cry, maybe ask another question. But instead she stepped toward me. The lantern dimmed, and the cold hit me so sharply my teeth ached. It wasn't natural cold. It was like the temperature dropped in a single breath, leaving the air brittle and hollow. The fog thickened around her, curling in tight wisps like smoke drawn toward a flame. She asked again if I'd seen her boy, but her voice had changed. It stretched, strained, the sadness turning sharp. There was something in it. Something like blame. Or anger. I stepped back, and her shoulders jerked toward me. The lantern flickered, and for a heartbeat I saw her face between the strands of wet hair. Not clearly. Not enough to describe. Just enough to know I never wanted to see it again. She repeated the question. But now it wasn't a question at all. It was a demand. A plea twisted into accusation. The sound rose quickly, too quickly, swelling from a cracked whisper into a sharp, ragged wail that echoed through the trees like something torn loose from the earth. The fog trembled around us. I swear I saw shapes inside it. Not people, not animals, just movements like fog pushed aside by invisible hands. Every instinct in me screamed to run. I turned and stumbled back toward my truck, moving faster than I ever thought I could. My hands fumbled over the door handle. Behind me, the wailing surged into something worse, a sound that didn't belong to anything living. Not loud. Not exactly. More like the distant howl of a storm that hasn't started yet. I slammed into the driver's seat, twisting the key even though I knew damn well the engine had overheated. The starter wheezed, then coughed, then died. I smacked the wheel, breath coming out in sharp bursts. The wailing stopped abruptly. Silence. Too deep. Too sudden. Like the entire ridge inhaled and held its breath. Then I saw it, the lantern glow stretching through the fog, brighter now, pushing toward my truck. Not swaying. Not bobbing. Sliding. I don't know how my engine came back to life. Maybe panic made me hear it wrong, or maybe luck finally decided to show itself. But the truck roared up on the third try, and the moment it did I floored it. Gravel spat behind me, fog splitting around my headlights like curtains torn open by force. But the lantern didn't fade behind me. It followed. Its pale glow skimmed through the fog, moving faster than anything walking. The bend in the road twisted left, then right, but the lantern stayed close, drifting through the trees parallel to me. Every time I glanced in the side mirror, the glow was still there. Too high, too even, too steady. And then her voice carried down the ridge. Not a scream this time. A whisper. Asking again. Begging again. Her words crawled into the cab of my truck like cold air leaking through a cracked window. The sound didn't fit the speed of my driving, didn't fade with distance. It stayed beside me for what felt like miles. It wasn't until I hit pavement again that the glow finally peeled off into the trees, swallowed by fog that lifted as suddenly as it had appeared. The cold left my body all at once, replaced by a shaking that wouldn't stop no matter how tight I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I was too afraid I'd still see that pale glow following me down the blacktop. Or worse, that I'd see her standing in the middle of the road, waiting for someone else to ask about her boy. For weeks afterward, I dreamed of her. The wet hair. The stillness. The way the lantern glided like it wasn't carried by anything solid. I'd wake up sweating, convinced I still heard her voice somewhere in the room with me, soft and broken, asking that same impossible question. People still tell stories about her. Folks who fish along the ridge swear they've seen a glow drifting across the tree line at night. Hikers say they've heard someone calling out for help, but when they follow the voice, they find nothing but fog and silence. I don't care what version anyone believes anymore. I know what I saw. I know how the cold sank into me like it wanted to stay. And sometimes, when the fog rolls down the ridge just right, I feel that same drop in temperature creep along my spine, and I can almost hear her whispering somewhere behind the trees. Still searching. Still waiting. Still calling for a boy that no one in Ridgepoint ever found. I grew up hearing rumors about the old Timbercleft Church, but around here, rumors are thicker than the vines that crawl up abandoned buildings. Kids would say things like you could hear hymns when no one was inside, or that the preacher never really left even after the place shut down in the 70s. I never believed any of it. To me, it was just one of those forgotten Appalachian relics. Something left behind when the mines dried up and folks drifted away. So when my friends dared me to go inside one October evening, I said yes without thinking twice. Even the way the sky looked that evening didn't bother me, despite the clouds hanging low and heavy, turning everything copper-colored. The air had that strange stillness right before true dark settles in, the kind that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. The church sat crooked at the end of Timbercleft Road, half swallowed by vines, the steeple leaning like it was tired of holding its own weight. It didn't look haunted, just tired. The three of us walked across the overgrown lot, trying to act braver than we felt. Leaves crunched louder than they should have. Even our footsteps felt like an intrusion. When we reached the door, the wood was soft with rot, and the handle came off in my friend Tyler's hand. We pushed the door open, and a wave of cold air rolled out, even colder than the night behind us. Inside, the smell hit us first. Old wood, mildew, and something faintly metallic. Dust drifted in the thin, dying beams of sunlight that squeezed through the boarded windows. The place had an old sadness to it, like it remembered better days. Still, nothing about it felt supernatural or dangerous. Just abandoned. Just forgotten. We spread out a little, each drawn by our own curiosity. My flashlight caught the warped pews, their varnish bubbled and peeling. The hymnals were scattered across the floor, the pages swollen from decades of damp. I remember thinking it was a shame. Someone had once cared enough to keep this place polished and warm. Now it was a skeleton of what it used to be. I didn't feel scared. Not yet. But something in my chest felt tight, like the room was slowly shrinking around us. And every footstep I took seemed to echo louder than it should have. Louder than mine alone. At first I chalked it up to acoustics. Old buildings make strange noises. But after a few minutes, I started noticing that whenever I took a step, there was another, slightly behind. Not directly behind me, just close enough to notice, far enough to second-guess. When I stopped moving, the echo kept going for half a heartbeat before fading away. I didn't want to be the one to point it out. I didn't want to spook the others. But when Tyler turned toward me and said, "Did you hear that?" in a tight whisper, I knew it wasn't my imagination. We gathered in the middle of the sanctuary, 3 dim flashlights cutting across the dusty air. None of us talked. We didn't have to. We all heard something circling us, slow, deliberate footsteps, pressing gently on the old wooden floorboards. They moved like someone pacing, like someone deciding whether we belonged there or not. It was too quiet to pinpoint the exact location, but loud enough to know we weren't alone. My heart thudded hard enough that it almost drowned the noise out. Almost. Then my flashlight flickered. Just once. Just enough to make the room jump shadows. In that split second of darkness, I swear I heard breathing. Close. Too close. When the light came back, nothing had changed, but everything felt different. The air grew heavy, thick in my lungs, like the room wanted us to leave. Tyler tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "Probably just an animal," he said. But I saw the way his hand shook. No animal moves in slow circles around you. No animal taps the floor right behind you with enough force to make the wood jump. Which is exactly what happened next. A sharp knock hit the floor behind Tyler. One clean, deliberate tap that sounded like someone rapping their knuckles or the end of a cane. Tyler spun around so fast his flashlight beam jerked across the wall. Nothing was there. But the dust on the floor behind him. I'll never forget this. was disturbed, like something had stepped there, like something heavy had pressed down just long enough to leave a darker patch among the dust. That's when we decided to leave. We didn't run. Not yet. We just backed toward the entrance. Each step felt like walking through invisible molasses. The air grew colder, heavier, like the whole building was slowly inhaling. The footsteps began again, but now faster. Not rushing, not running, but closing in, tightening circles around us. And for the first time since entering, I felt something like regret. Like we'd trespassed somewhere we weren't meant to be. We reached the foyer where the light was weakest. I pushed the warped door, but it didn't budge. Not jammed, just resisting. Like someone was holding it shut from the other side. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. Behind us, the footsteps stopped. Just stopped. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was expectant. Then the church bell rang. I swear on everything I know, that bell hadn't moved in decades. The rope was gone, rotted away. The wheel itself was rusted solid. There was no breeze, no wind. But the bell rang once. Low, mournful, vibrating through the floorboards and into my bones. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was almost gentle. But the sound felt wrong, like it came from somewhere deeper than the steeple. A sound drawn out of the building itself, not the metal. That broke us. We shoved the door again with all we had, and it finally gave way with a crack. The three of us spilled outside like drowning men breaking the surface. The cold night hit my face, sharp and bright after the suffocating air inside. But I didn't stop to breathe it in. We ran across the lot, tripping over roots and stones, not daring to look back. Somehow the dark outside felt safer. When we reached the road, I finally turned around. The church sat quiet, shadowed, ordinary in the dying light. But in the doorway, where we'd just escaped, I saw someone standing. Still. Tall. Not moving, not following, just watching. I couldn't make out any features. The figure was just a darker shape among shadows. But I knew it saw us. And I knew it didn't want us back. We didn't talk on the drive home. We barely talked for days. When we finally tried to tell the story, no one believed us, not fully. People don't like to imagine something old and abandoned still paying attention. But I know what I heard, what I felt, what followed us with patient, measured steps. I haven't gone near Timbercleft Road since, and sometimes on quiet nights when the wind dies down, I swear I can still feel that dull vibration in my bones, the echo of a bell that shouldn't be able to ring at all. I was driving home later than usual that night, the kind of late where the world feels half asleep and the mountains seem to lean in closer than they should. Old Harper Road was the only route that cut through that stretch, and anyone from around here knows it's the sort of road you don't linger on after dark. The trees grow right up to the asphalt, tall and black against the sky, and the whole place feels like it's waiting. Still, I'd taken that road thousands of times. I didn't think much about the hour or the shadows or the way the fog curled low along the ditch lines like something crawling on its belly. But then I saw the boy. He was up ahead on the right side of the road, walking with his head down and his hands shoved into the pockets of a bright red jacket. Not maroon or rust-colored like most hunting gear. This was vivid, almost neon. My headlights hit it like it was catching fire. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. And out there at almost midnight, miles from any house, there was no way he was supposed to be walking alone. I slowed down, rolled to a crawl, and lowered my window. "Hey, buddy," I called. "You all right? You need help." He didn't react. Didn't even twitch. He just kept walking, step after step, perfectly even, like his feet knew exactly where to go without him thinking about it. There was something disturbing about the way he moved. Not stiff, not limp. Just patterned. As if his stride had been set by metronome instead of muscle. I pulled ahead of him by maybe 20 feet and stopped. I figured I'd get out, put myself in his line of vision, maybe let him see a friendly face. But when I turned around, expecting to see that bright red spot coming toward me in the dark, he was gone. The road behind me was empty all the way back to the bend. More than 100 yards of straight pavement. No houses. No driveways. No cover except the ditch and the woods. I told myself he must have stepped off the road faster than I expected. Kids get scared, they hide. That made sense. It had to. Still, my stomach was tight when I grabbed my phone flashlight and walked to the edge of the ditch. The fog was thicker there, clinging low to the damp grass. I nearly called out again, but something in my throat wouldn't let the words out. That was when I heard it. Breathing. Soft, wet breathing. Not quite a wheeze, not quite a sob. Just the slow, uneven exhale of someone trying not to cry. It was coming from down in the ditch where the grass dipped deeper. The sound of kid breathing should have made me feel relief. But instead it made my legs feel hollow. Then I heard his voice. "It's cold. Can you help me?" The words floated up like mist, drawn out and trembling. My flashlight shook in my hand as I pointed it toward the sound. "Hey, it's okay," I managed. "I'm here. Just tell me where you are." But there wasn't any boy there. Just flattened grass, long streaks of it pressed down like someone had been lying there moments ago. The fog eddied in the depression, curling around the shape left behind. My skin crawled. I didn't want to lean closer, but something made me. Some stubborn part of me that refused to believe anything strange was happening. That's when I saw something at the corner of my eye. Across the road. On the opposite side. The red jacket. The boy stood there facing the trees. Perfectly still. The same exact jacket, glowing faintly under the moonlight like the fabric held its own light. I turned so fast I nearly slipped. "Hey!" I shouted before thinking. He didn't move. Didn't even flinch. He just stood with his back to me, head tilted downward like he was staring at his shoes. I crossed the road slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. The woods were unnaturally quiet. No insects, no wind through the branches. Just the muted thump of my heartbeat in my ears. I stopped maybe 10 feet behind him. "You shouldn't be out here," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Tell me your name. I'll get you home." He didn't answer. Instead, I felt the air shift around me, like pressure building before a storm. It pressed against my skull, made my vision blur around the edges. Something was wrong. Something was deeply, deeply wrong. "Kid," I said quietly, "look at me." His head lifted. Not fast. Not slow. Just wrong. Like the movement wasn't his choice. Like something lifted it for him. And when his face came into view, my stomach knotted so hard I nearly doubled over. It wasn't mangled or monstrous. It was worse. It was blank. Pale. Expressionless. Like a face still trying to remember how to be one. His eyes weren't looking at me. They weren't focusing on anything. They were open, but empty in a way I've never seen in a living person. And the worst part, the part that still wakes me up at night, was that his mouth was partially open like he'd been caught mid-breath. But no breath came out. Everything in me screamed to run. Every instinct I had, every scrap of sense, told me to get away. But my legs were rooted. The boy's face twitched. Just once. Like something inside him was stirring, pushing upward, testing the shape of his features. His lips trembled. His jaw shifted. Then in a soft, distorted whisper that matched the voice from the ditch, he said, "It's cold." The pressure around me tightened, squeezing my ribs. The fog thickened, rising in slow coils around his feet, clinging to his jacket like it was being drawn toward him. His head jerked slightly to the left, then right like he was hearing something just behind him. Something close. That finally broke whatever spell held me. I stumbled back, nearly falling into the road. My fingers fumbled with the door handle before I managed to yank it open. I shoved myself inside and slammed the lock down without thinking. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly get the key into the ignition. Before the engine caught, I made the mistake of glancing up. The boy was standing right at the edge of the road now, closer than before. Still facing me, head tilted, expression empty. His red jacket looked brighter somehow, like it was the only thing holding shape in the fog. And for a split second, just long enough to know I wasn't imagining it, his lips moved again. "Help me." But it didn't sound like a plea. Not anymore. It sounded like a lure. The car roared to life, and I floored it so hard the tires spit gravel behind me. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't check if he moved. I didn't want to know if he followed. Old Harper Road twisted through the dark like a vein, and I tore down it as fast as the car could handle. My hands were numb on the wheel. My throat felt raw, like the cold had scraped it clean. I didn't slow down until I hit the highway, until the lights of passing traffic finally broke the spell of the dark behind me. I told myself I'd imagined it, that it was exhaustion, headlights playing tricks, fog messing with depth perception. But deep down, I know what I saw. And I've heard other stories since, quietly shared, whispered at the bar or mentioned on long drives, about a kid in a red jacket walking that road after dark. Always near that same stretch of ditch. Always alone. Some people say he's a ghost. Some say he's just an urban legend to keep drivers awake on late-night roads. But I know better. The boy I saw wasn't lost. He wasn't looking for help. He was waiting. And I still won't drive Old Harper Road after midnight. Not anymore. Not even with someone else in the car. Because every time I think about that night, every time I close my eyes and remember the way the fog curled around his feet, I hear that same whisper in the ditch. I never paid much attention to Barlow Bridge before that night. It was one of those old concrete crossings you barely notice unless you're stuck behind a tractor on your way home. The creek beneath it wasn't deep, just wide enough to carve a shallow ribbon through the rocks, and the bridge itself had long since been stained dark by years of rain and runoff. I must have driven across it 100 times without looking twice. But the night everything changed. The rain wasn't falling so much as pouring, thick, heavy sheets that swallowed the road and made the world feel small and suffocating. My wipers worked themselves raw trying to keep up. I was halfway across when my headlights caught a shape down below. A person. A woman. She stood beneath the bridge's archway like she'd grown out of the shadows there. Her hair plastered to her face and clothes clinging to her like a second skin. Even from above, I could see her shaking. Arms wrapped around herself, shoulders trembling in a way that made my stomach twist. A storm like that could kill someone with hypothermia in an hour. Without thinking, I pulled over, the truck shuddering as I hit the gravel shoulder. From the top of the bridge, the rain muted my voice. "Ma'am, you all right down there? You hurt?" No answer. She didn't even look up. She just kept sobbing, this slow, steady sound that didn't rise or fall with breath, just continued like a metronome. The sound carried strangely, threading itself perfectly through the roar of rain and the rush of water below. I hesitated. Something in me said it wasn't right. The hour, the weather, the way she stood so still except for the trembling. But leaving someone like that didn't feel right either. So I took my flashlight and started down the embankment, boots sinking deep into the mud. The further down I went, the clearer her crying became. It sharpened, not louder, not closer, just more precise, like each sob was carving its own shape in the air. By the time I reached the bottom, rainwater soaking through my jacket, something felt off. The beam from my flashlight cut across the underside of the bridge, the dripping arch, the slick stones, the small pool where rainwater collected, but there was no one standing there. No woman. No footprint in the mud. No disturbed grass. The space was empty in the same way a cleaned room is empty, as if something had been there moments before and erased itself. "Hello." My voice stumbled out. "Ma'am, are you hiding? I'm just trying to help." Nothing answered. Even the crying had stopped. The only sound was the river slapping rocks and the rain pounding the earth. I took a cautious step forward, the water soaking my socks through my boots, and looked around. Nothing. No sign of anyone at all. I told myself she must have moved under the bridge while I was climbing down. Maybe she slipped behind a pillar. Maybe she didn't want help. I turned to head back up the embankment, wiping rain from my eyes, and the sobbing started again. But this time, it wasn't distant or echoing from somewhere under the bridge. It was right behind me. I froze so hard my breath snapped in my chest. The sound wasn't just crying now. It was sharp, wet, trembling, each sob cutting like a blade. My flashlight beam shook across the concrete pillars, the grass, the river. Nothing moved. But the crying wouldn't stop. It came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the bridge, twisting in the echo. I couldn't tell if it was behind me, beside me, or inside the hollow of the archway. "Where are you?" I whispered. My voice barely carried. The crying hitched suddenly, like whoever it was had just taken a breath close enough to fog the skin on the back of my neck. I felt it, the faint warmth of exhale through cold rain. I spun around, slipping in the mud, catching myself on one of the concrete supports. The light swung wild in my hand. Nothing. Just the blank underside of the bridge and the runnels of water streaking down the walls. But something moved. Not clearly, not enough to identify, but the kind of movement you feel before you see. A shifting of space. A displacement of where air should be. It circled me, close enough that I could sense the arc of motion, like someone pacing around me at the edge of my sight line. My heart hammered so hard I could feel blood thumping in my gums. The crying softened again, drifting around the embankment with no origin point. It didn't sound like a woman anymore either. It sounded layered. Multiple voices overlapping into the same sound, some low, some high, all trembling with the same quiet grief. I backed up until my hand touched the cold stone wall of the archway. The bridge felt colder than anything outside should have been. Like touching winter. Raindrops slapped the creek in heavy plunks, each one sending up a small splash. But mixed with that rhythm I heard something else. A breath. Slow. Wet. Too close. I didn't want to turn around again. I felt like if I did, I'd see something I wouldn't be able to forget. Something that would burn itself into my mind forever. But standing still felt worse, like waiting for a hand to close over my shoulder. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. I just ran. I tore up that embankment on hands and knees, slipping on mud and grabbing roots, pulling myself upward with more strength than I should have had. The crying chased me. It didn't get louder, just closer, like it was following the sound of my heartbeat. Halfway up, I slipped and scraped my palm open on a rock. The sting barely registered. I scrambled up again until my hands found the wet edge of the pavement. When I hauled myself over the top, rainwater splashed into my mouth and nose. I nearly choked. I scrambled upright, vision blurring, and sprinted to my truck. Even inside the cab, the world felt wrong. The windows fogged instantly. My breath came in shallow bursts. And underneath the roar of rain on the roof, I could still hear her, that layered, broken sobbing, muffled like it was trapped inside the frame of the truck itself. I slammed the locks and fumbled with the keys, cursing through my teeth. When the engine finally roared to life, I peeled away from the shoulder so fast the tires spat water in thick lines behind me. For the first mile, the crying followed. Faint through the storm, but still there, rising and falling like someone being pulled underwater. It only faded when I reached the highway, like the sound couldn't follow past the open stretch. Maybe the rain drowned it out. Maybe distance killed it. I don't know. I just know that every time I cross Barlow Bridge now, always during the day, always with windows up and music loud, I keep my eyes straight ahead. I don't look down. I don't slow. Because sometimes, even in daylight, I catch glimpses of movement beneath the archway. A shadow. A shape. Something hunched or trembling. And on one especially fog-heavy morning, when the road was empty and the world felt thin, I could have sworn I heard it again. That quiet, rhythmic sobbing. Like someone waiting. I'd driven past that stretch of Cedar Ridge countless times, the road winding through thick woods and old hills that seemed to lean closer to the car the later it got, but I'd never stopped at the payphone that sat near the curve. It had been dead for years, the line cut after the flood, and even in daylight it looked like something left behind, rusted and forgotten. That night, the wind had settled in low, dragging a chill across the asphalt, and the November darkness made the ridge feel smaller, tighter, as if the trees themselves were pressing in. My headlights caught the crooked phone just before I rounded the bend, and I almost didn't see it until the sound reached me. The ringing, sharp and urgent, echoing off the empty road. Every instinct in me screamed to keep driving. It was late, and nobody ever used that road at night. And yet, something made me pull over, the truck tires crunching over gravel as I slowed to a stop beside the metal frame. The phone leaned sideways, buttons mottled with rust, cord fraying like it had survived a dozen storms, but it rang with a clarity that shouldn't have been possible, each note cutting through the night air like a bell. My hands shook as I lifted the receiver, and the line was cold against my ear, but not silent. A voice came through, trembling, weak, almost drowned out by the static. "Don't come up the ridge." I swallowed hard. "Hello," I said, my voice brittle. No reply. Just the faint crackle of the receiver. Then another voice came over the line, deeper, drawn out, dragging the words as though weighed down with some unseen gravity. "Don't come up the ridge." The effect was surreal, each syllable vibrating against the other in a slow, impossible harmony. I felt my stomach tighten as more voices layered in over the first, soft whispers overlapping, the same words repeated in tones that didn't belong to anyone alive. Some high, some low, some broken and quivering like they'd been held in mouths long past their time. I dropped the receiver in a startled reflex, the phone clattering against its metal frame. But before I could step back to the truck, the ringing started again, louder this time, frantic, almost panicked. My hands went to the door, and the moment I touched the handle, the ringing cut off like a knife through silence. The woods around me were still. Too still. I could hear the wind sighing through the treetops, the soft rustle of leaves in one corner, but the usual chorus of nocturnal life, the owls, the foxes, the distant hum of insects, was gone. My heart thumped, uneven, like it didn't know how to pace itself in the dark. I looked up the ridge toward the hills that rose behind the phone, and there it was, a shape high against the dark tree line, watching. Not moving, just watching. I couldn't tell if it was human, not at that distance, not in the shifting shadows. But there was intent there, something patient and patient enough to make me hold my breath. My truck suddenly felt miles away. The air grew colder, though the wind hadn't changed, and the hairs on the back of my neck lifted like someone had whispered across them. I forced my fingers to unclench from the door, my legs heavy under the weight of unease. I tried to reason it out, flooded memories of the payphone's history, prank calls from kids long gone, maybe a hiker moving along the ridge, but nothing fit. The shadows didn't shift as a person might. The shape stayed, watching, always watching. I turned back toward the truck and climbed in, locking the doors and fumbling for the key. My hands were slick from sweat and rain, and my breath came in short bursts that echoed inside the cab. When the engine caught, I eased onto the gravel and glanced again at the ridge, half expecting the shape to vanish, but it hadn't. The figure still lingered at the crest, black against the night, silent and patient. Every time I looked in a rearview mirror while pulling onto the main road, I could feel the weight of those voices echoing, a kind of layered warning that seemed to vibrate in the air, even without the phone in reach. I told myself it was stress, that the night, the wind, the isolation of Cedar Ridge had played tricks on my senses. But I've driven that road many times since, and sometimes, just past the old curve, I swear I can hear faint ringing, soft and distant, layered, impossible to ignore. I never stop anymore. Not for anything. And every time I pass that phone, crooked and rusted in the dark, I feel it watching, waiting, and I remember the voices whispering their warning in a way that no one else alive could have known. Don't come up the ridge. I'd never been much for dares or ghost stories, but Blackburn Cemetery had a reputation all its own back when I was a teen, a place kids sneaked off to for thrills or to prove they weren't scared of dying. Me, I never cared much for it. There was something about the place that felt too still, like the air itself was holding its breath, even in the middle of the day when the sun filtered weakly through the old trees. That late fall evening, my cousin and I decided to cut through the old trail behind the cemetery, thinking it would save us a half-hour walk home before dark. The trail was narrow, overgrown in sections, the roots slick with fallen leaves and rain from earlier in the day. Normally it felt tight, but that night it felt suffocating, the trees leaning inward, their branches scraping at each other in the windless air, and the smell of damp earth and decay clinging to our clothes and hair. We'd been halfway down the path when my cousin froze, a hand gripping my sleeve. His eyes were locked on something in the darkened pines. I followed his gaze and saw it, a tall, thin figure standing between the trees, completely still, facing us. At first, I thought it was someone from town, maybe one of the older boys trying to scare us, but the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. It was too tall, too rigid, too quiet. The shape didn't shift naturally. It wasn't breathing in a way I could see, didn't sway with the wind, didn't even seem to register the faint light from our flashlights. I swallowed hard, trying to laugh it off, and my cousin whispered, "He's getting closer." I laughed nervously, shaking my head, because the figure hadn't moved a foot. But when I blinked, or thought I blinked, it had shifted several feet nearer, though it had never walked. My heart kicked into my chest and I realized I was holding my breath without thinking, my legs frozen in place while the figure seemed to lean in closer with every second we weren't looking directly at it. We started backing down the trail slowly, keeping our eyes fixed on the dark outline, and every time we lost sight of it for even a moment, it would reappear nearer, arms hanging at its sides like dead weight, too straight, too lifeless. I felt the chill of air against my skin, though the night wasn't cold, and the sound of leaves underfoot sounded louder than it should have, echoing in the stillness. My cousin's hand gripped mine, trembling, and I could hear his shallow breathing, matching my own fear-stricken inhale and exhale. The trail seemed endless, the trees pressing in tighter, shadows pooling around us, hiding the shape's legs and feet, making it impossible to measure how it moved, yet somehow we knew it was closing in. When we reached the cemetery fence, relief surged, and we scrambled over the wooden slats, shaking in ways I didn't realize until later. We thought we were safe. But then my cousin's breath hitched, a sound I'll never forget, and I turned just in time to see the figure again, standing behind the farthest row of gravestones. This time it wasn't watching the woods. It was watching us. The way it stood, unmoving yet present, made me feel like I'd walked into a trap we didn't even know existed. The shadows around it pooled unnaturally, almost like the darkness itself clung to its thin frame. The air grew heavier, like someone had pressed a hand against my chest, and a subtle, rotten sweet smell hit me, almost imperceptible but enough to make my stomach lurch. My cousin and I didn't speak. Our feet barely touched the ground as we ran, stumbling over roots and scattered leaves, never glancing back, but I could feel its presence like a weight behind our shoulders, following, waiting, patient. By the time we hit the streetlights of town, my chest was heaving, my knees burned, and I could still feel the lingering sense that it hadn't moved, that it hadn't left. Even now, decades later, whenever I pass that trail behind Blackburn Cemetery or glimpse the gravestones through the trees, I feel that same pressure, that same quiet watching. It's not a memory that fades. It's a shadow in the corner of the night, stretching just beyond the edges of what's real, reminding me that some things don't need to move to follow you, and some figures don't need to speak to let you know they've been there all along. There's a small white house on the edge of town that's been abandoned longer than I've been alive, and everyone knows it. The windows are nailed shut, the porch sags like it's tired of holding its own weight, and the yard is nothing but dead weeds tangled with roots that push up through the cracked soil. For years, it sat empty, just a quiet presence at the end of the road, until the story started. Quiet at first, murmured in the grocery store or over beers at the diner, about the hum. People said it came just after midnight, a low, constant vibration that rose and fell like a distant engine, the kind of sound that seeps into your chest and makes your teeth tingle. I never believed it. Not until that one night when I was driving home late, windows down because the air was thick and still, the kind of night where every shadow looks too deep, every tree too close. I heard it then, the faint vibration, and I froze mid-turn, letting the hum settle in over the tires, over the road, over the fog that had crept in off the river. It wasn't loud, just enough to make the air itself pulse, but there was a melody to it, a rhythm, a whisper beneath the low tone that twisted my stomach and tugged at the edges of my nerves. I told myself to keep driving, to ignore it, but my feet moved before my brain could catch up, guiding me off the asphalt and onto the cracked gravel of the driveway. The closer I got, the more the sound pressed in, vibrating through my teeth, humming in my bones, as if the house itself were alive, feeding off the dark, and I could see the boards over the windows shiver faintly, like something inside was brushing against them. The porch sagged beneath my weight when I stepped up, would groaning in complaint, and then the humming stopped. Instantly. The absence of sound struck me harder than the hum ever could, and for a moment I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat, quick and shallow in the cold night air. I turned to leave, telling myself I'd gone far enough, but then it began again. Not the low, steady vibration I'd first heard, but a tapping, faint, deliberate, coming from the other side of the front door. One tap. Two. Then dozens, rapid, uneven, as if fingers, 10, 20. were drumming across the wood from somewhere inside. My skin prickled, hair standing on end, the porch boards trembling beneath my boots, and the humming returned, louder now, frantic like it had sensed my hesitation. I wanted to run, and every instinct screamed at me to do it, but something tethered me there, staring at the door, feeling the hum crawl under my skin, into my chest, settling in my stomach like a stone. My hand twitched toward the door, just to test it, and the tapping stopped, replaced by a silence so complete it made my ears ring, a ringing that carried the faint echo of the hum in every pulse. I didn't touch the door again. I just watched, waited, and felt the vibration curl around my ankles, trying to pull me closer, until finally, overwhelmed, I turned and ran, stumbling down the gravel path, boots skidding in loose stone, breath tearing from my lungs. Even as I slammed the truck door and roared back onto the road, the hum chased me, faint now, wavering, drifting across the dark fields, a low presence that didn't fade with distance. I've driven past that house dozens of times since, always at night, windows up, music loud, eyes straight ahead, but the hum follows me. Not always audible, but always there, pressing in my chest, tickling the base of my teeth, curling at the edges of my vision like a shadow that lingers just beyond sight, reminding me that some houses don't stay empty, that some sounds are meant to pull you in, and that some nights, no matter how far you drive, the presence behind the boards is still alive, still watching, still humming.